Emily's heart pounded as she ran through the rain-soaked streets, calling out Jake's name. The storm had come suddenly, with loud thunder shaking the windows of her small house. One moment, Jake had been curled up on the porch, watching the raindrops fall. The next, he was gone. "Jake, Jake, come back," Emily shouted, her voice barely heard over the howling wind. She checked the backyard, the neighbor's garden, and even the small park down the street. No sign of him. The leash still hung by the door, untouched. The gate was slightly open. Emily's stomach twisted. Had he run out? Had the storm scared him? Jake wasn't just a pet. He was her best friend. She had rescued him when he was just a puppy, abandoned on the side of the road. From that moment, he followed her everywhere, on morning walks, road trips, even to the coffee shop where the barista always gave him a treat. His golden fur and warm brown eyes made everyone smile. But now he was gone. Emily grabbed her phone with shaking hands and started calling people. "Have you seen Jake?" she asked her neighbors. "I'm so sorry, Emily." "I haven't," one replied. "I'll check my backyard," another said. The rain made everything harder. It washed away Jake's scent, making it difficult for him to find his way back. She printed missing dog posters, taping them to lampposts and shop windows. She posted online, hoping someone, anyone, had seen him. Days passed, then weeks. She checked the shelter every morning, hoping for good news. Every time the phone rang, her heart jumped, but it was never about Jake. People shared her posts, sent her messages of support, but no one had seen him. The world felt empty without the sound of his paws tapping on the wooden floor. One night, Emily sat on the porch, staring at the street. The air was cold, but she barely noticed. Her fingers traced the tag on Jake's spare collar, the one with his name and her phone number. "Where are you, buddy?" she whispered. Far away, in an unfamiliar place, Jake was out there. Alone, lost, searching for a way back home. Jake had never felt so lost. The rain poured down as he ran, his golden fur soaked and heavy. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had to keep moving. Loud thunder cracked above, and each boom made him flinch. He had never liked storms. Emily always comforted him, rubbing his ears and whispering, "It's okay, buddy. I'm here." But Emily wasn't here now. He slowed down, panting. His paws ached from running on rough pavement. He had no idea how far he had gone. The neighborhood smelled different, unfamiliar. He sniffed the air, trying to catch Emily's scent, but the rain had washed it all away. Then, through the darkness, he spotted headlights. A large truck slowed down as it approached him. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, pulled over and stepped out, holding an umbrella. "Hey there, buddy," the man said gently. "What are you doing out here all alone?" Jake took a cautious step back. He didn't know this man. But the man knelt down, offering his hand. He smelled like leather and food, warm, comforting smells. Jake hesitated, then stepped closer. "You look lost," the man said. He pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around Jake. "Come on, let's get you out of this rain." Jake didn't resist as the man lifted him into the truck. The seat was soft, and the air was warm. The man turned on the heater and drove off. Jake stared out the window, watching the dark streets pass by. He didn't know where he was going, but at least he wasn't alone. The truck driver's name was Tom. He was a long-haul driver, always on the road. Tom took Jake to a gas station and gave him some food, warm chicken from his own dinner. Jake ate quickly, his tail wagging slightly for the first time since he had run away. "You're a good boy," Tom said, scratching Jake's head. "No collar, huh? Someone must be missing you." Tom asked around, but no one recognized Jake. The storm had knocked out power in some areas, and phone lines were down. He decided to keep Jake with him for now. Over the next few days, Jake got used to life on the road. He rode in the passenger seat, watching the world go by. Tom talked to him, telling stories about the places they passed. "I used to have a dog like you," Tom said one evening as they stopped at a rest area. "Best friend I ever had." Jake didn't understand the words, but he felt the warmth in Tom's voice. He liked Tom, but every time he looked out the window, his heart ached. He wanted to go home. One day, at a truck stop, Jake heard a familiar sound, a woman calling a dog's name. His ears perked up, and his tail started wagging. Was it Emily? He jumped out of the truck and ran toward the voice. But when he reached the woman, his excitement faded. It wasn't Emily. Tom sighed. "You're looking for her, aren't you?" Jake lowered his head. He didn't belong here. Tom knelt beside him. "I'll help you, buddy. We'll find your way home." And so, Jake's journey continued. Jake had spent months traveling with Tom. They had crossed cities, highways, and open fields. Every day, Jake sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, hoping to see something familiar, something that would lead him home. Tom tried his best. At every stop, he asked people if they had seen lost dog posters. He checked shelters and online pages, but nothing led back to Emily. "Don't worry, buddy," Tom said one evening as they parked at a roadside diner. "We'll find your home someday." Jake wagged his tail slightly, but deep down, he was starting to wonder if he ever would. One morning, as they were driving through a mountain road, a loud bang shook the truck. Tom gripped the steering wheel. "Hang on, Jake." The truck swerved. A tire had blown out. Tom struggled to control the vehicle, but the truck skidded off the road and into a ditch. It wasn't a bad crash, but the sudden jolt sent Jake flying forward. Shaken, Jake scrambled up, his heart pounding. The door had popped open from the impact. The loud noises and sudden movement frightened him. His instincts kicked in. He had to get away. "Jake, stay," Tom shouted. But fear took over. Jake leaped out of the truck and ran. He didn't stop running until his legs gave out. He had no idea where he was. Trees surrounded him, tall and unfamiliar. The smell of pine filled the air. He was alone again. Panting, he turned in circles, confused. Where was Tom? Where was Emily? He had lost both of them. The sound of birds and rustling leaves filled the silence. Jake whimpered. He had been safe with Tom. But now he was back to where he started, lost. For days, he wandered through the forest. He drank from streams and slept under trees. Sometimes he heard cars in the distance, but he was too scared to go near the road. Hunger gnawed at his stomach. He found berries and scraps, but it wasn't enough. He grew weaker. He missed Emily's warm hands and the sound of her voice. One night, he saw a small town in the distance. Lights glowed in the dark. His tail wagged slightly. Maybe, just maybe, someone there could help him. Summoning his last bit of strength, Jake stepped forward. His journey wasn't over yet. Jake stepped into the small town, his legs weak and his fur dirty. He was tired, hungry, and unsure of where to go. The streets were quiet, with only a few cars passing by. Lights from store windows glowed, casting long shadows on the pavement. He sniffed the air. The smell of food was strong. His stomach growled. Following the scent, he found himself near a small cafe. A man sat outside, eating a sandwich. Jake hesitated. He had never begged for food before, but hunger made him brave. He took a step closer. The man noticed him and frowned. "Shoe dog," he said, waving his hand. Jake lowered his head and backed away. His tail drooped. He wasn't welcome here. For days, Jake wandered through the town, searching for food and shelter. Some people ignored him. Others chased him away. One night, he found an alley behind a bakery. The scent of bread filled the air. Near the trash bin, he spotted a half-eaten roll. Carefully, he picked it up and chewed slowly, savoring every bite. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him going. Jake curled up behind the bakery, his body shivering in the cold. He missed Emily's warm house, his soft bed, and the gentle touch of her hand. Would he ever find her again? One afternoon, as Jake roamed the streets, he heard a soft voice behind him. "Hey, buddy, are you lost?" He turned and saw a young woman kneeling nearby. She had a kind smile and warm eyes. Jake hesitated. He had been chased away so many times, but something about her seemed different. The woman held out her hand. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." Jake took a small step forward. He sniffed her fingers. She smelled like kindness. "My name is Megan," she said. "You're all alone, aren't you?" Jake didn't understand the words, but he felt the sadness in her voice. Megan reached into her bag and pulled out a sandwich. She tore off a piece and placed it on the ground. Jake sniffed it, then carefully ate it. "You're a good boy," she said, stroking his head gently. For the first time in weeks, Jake felt safe. Megan led Jake to a small building with a bright sign. Animal Rescue Shelter. Inside, it smelled of soap, blankets, and other dogs. A soft bed and a bowl of fresh water waited for him. "You can stay here for now," Megan said, smiling. "We'll take care of you." Jake lay down on the bed, his body finally able to rest. For the first time in a long while, he closed his eyes without fear. But deep inside, he still longed for Emily. Would she ever find him? Jake slowly adjusted to life at the shelter. It wasn't home, but it was warm, safe, and filled with kind people. Megan made sure he had food every day, a soft bed to sleep on, and gentle pats on the head. But even with all that, something was missing. Every time the shelter door opened, Jake's ears perked up. His heart raced, hoping, just maybe, it would be Emily. But each time, it was someone else. Another family looking for a pet. Another stranger walking by. Megan noticed. She saw the way Jake always watched the door, waiting. She had seen many lost dogs before, but something about Jake was different. He wasn't just looking for a new home. He was waiting for someone from his past. One evening, as she sat beside him, she stroked his fur and whispered, "You're looking for someone, aren't you?" Jake rested his head on her lap, his brown eyes filled with longing. Megan decided to help. She took a picture of Jake and posted it online with a simple message. "This sweet dog was found alone, searching for something or someone. Do you know him?" She shared it on lost pet pages, hoping someone would recognize him. Days passed. People commented, saying he was beautiful, that they wished they could adopt him. But no one claimed him. Then, one night, Megan's phone buzzed. She picked it up and gasped. A message from a woman named Emily appeared. "That's my dog. That's Jake." Megan's heart pounded. Could it really be true? She quickly replied, asking for proof. Emily sent a picture. An old one of Jake as a puppy, curled up beside her. Tears filled Megan's eyes. "It's him," she whispered. But there was one problem. Emily was far away, in another state. How would Jake get home? The next morning, Megan knelt beside Jake, scratching his ears. "Guess what, buddy? We found your person." Jake tilted his head, sensing excitement in her voice. His tail wagged slightly. "She's coming for you," Megan said with a smile. "Soon, you'll be home." But then, she hesitated. Emily was far away. Traveling would be expensive. Would she be able to make the trip? Megan had an idea. She started a fundraiser, asking people for help to reunite Jake with Emily. She shared the story online, and soon, people from all over began donating. "Let's bring Jake home," one person wrote. "Every dog deserves to be with the one they love," said another. Within hours, enough money was raised for Jake's journey back. Megan wiped her eyes. The world was full of kindness. Jake's journey wasn't over yet, but for the first time in years, home was within reach. Jake didn't understand what was happening, but he could feel the excitement around him. Megan was smiling, other workers at the shelter were clapping, and people kept coming by to give him treats. Something was different. "Are you ready to go home, Jake?" Megan asked, scratching behind his ears. "Home. That word made Jake's tail wag, even though he didn't fully understand what was happening. But he could sense it. Something big was coming. A few days later, Megan placed a collar around Jake's neck. A shiny tag dangled from it, freshly made with Emily's name and phone number. Jake sniffed it and blinked up at Megan. "It's time, buddy," she said. Jake was led into a car. Megan sat beside him, holding his leash gently. The car moved forward, but this wasn't just another ride. It was the beginning of his journey back to Emily. After a short drive, they arrived at a small airport. Jake had never seen so many people in one place before. The sounds, the smells, the rush of movement, it was overwhelming. But Megan stayed by his side, speaking softly to keep him calm. A man in a uniform knelt down beside Jake. "So you're the famous dog going home, huh?" he said with a smile. He patted Jake's head before turning to Megan. "Everything is set. He'll be safe on the flight." Megan's eyes shone with unshed tears. "You're going home, Jake," she whispered. Jake didn't understand her words, but he licked her hand, sensing her kindness. She hugged him one last time. "Be a good boy. You'll see Emily soon." Then Jake was gently led into a special area of the plane, safe and secure for his journey. Megan waved as the plane took off, whispering, "Good luck, buddy." Jake had never been on a plane before. The gentle hum of the engine, the slight vibrations, it was all new. He curled up, resting his head on his paws, his heart beating fast. Would Emily really be waiting for him? The flight felt long, but eventually the plane landed. Jake was carefully carried out, and a kind worker led him outside. The moment he stepped into the fresh air, his ears perked up. A familiar scent hit his nose. His heart raced. He knew this smell. Emily. The doors to the airport slid open, and there she was. Emily stood just a few feet away, her hands covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Jake," she whispered. Jake froze for just a second. Then, everything inside him exploded with joy. He ran. "Jake!" Emily cried, dropping to her knees. Jake crashed into her arms, whining, licking her face, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. Emily sobbed, holding him tight. "I thought I lost you forever," she whispered. Jake didn't understand her words, but he understood her love. He nuzzled into her, closing his eyes as her familiar hand stroked his fur. He was home, and he would never be lost again. Jake didn't want to let go of Emily. He pressed his body against her, his tail wagging so hard that it thumped against the floor. Emily held him tightly, tears running down her cheeks. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "You're really here." People around them watched with smiles on their faces. Some clapped, others wiped their eyes. Even the airport staff looked touched by the moment. Jake licked Emily's face, his heart bursting with happiness. He had waited so long for this. After a few minutes, Emily finally pulled back and cupped his face in her hands. "Let's go home, buddy." The car ride was familiar. The sound of the engine, the feeling of movement. It reminded Jake of the times he and Emily used to go on drives together. He sat in the back seat, his eyes fixed on Emily as if making sure she wouldn't disappear again. Emily glanced at him through the mirror and smiled. "You haven't changed, have you?" she said. "Still my same sweet boy." Jake didn't understand the words, but her voice made him happy. The moment they turned onto a familiar street, Jake's ears perked up. His nose twitched. He knew this place. Then he saw it. His house. Jake let out a small whimper, his tail wagging like crazy. The car pulled into the driveway, and before Emily could even open the door, he was already trying to jump out. Okay, I know you're excited," she laughed, opening the door. Jake bolted out and ran straight to the front door. He pawed at it, turning in circles, whining with excitement. Emily ran up behind him, laughing. "Hold on, buddy." She unlocked the door and pushed it open. Jake dashed inside. The scent of home hit him immediately. It was warm, familiar, safe. He ran through the house, sniffing everything. His old bed, the couch, the kitchen where Emily used to sneak him treats. It was all the same. Toys were still in the corner where he had left them. His favorite blanket was still folded on the couch. It was as if time had stood still, waiting for him to return. Emily leaned against the doorway, watching him with tears in her eyes. "I always hoped you'd come back," she whispered. Jake ran back to her, pressing his head into her stomach. She laughed, hugging him tight. "You're home, Jake," she said softly. "Forever." The days that followed were like a dream. Jake fell into old routines as if he had never left. Morning walks with Emily, naps in his favorite sunny spot by the window, belly rubs on the couch. Emily kept looking at him like she couldn't believe he was real. She would randomly reach out and touch his fur, as if making sure he wasn't just a dream. One evening, she sat on the porch with him, watching the sunset. Jake rested his head on her lap, his tail wagging lazily. "You've been through so much, haven't you?" she murmured. Jake closed his eyes, letting out a deep, content sigh. He had been lost. He had traveled far. He had met kind strangers and faced many challenges. But none of that mattered anymore. Because he was home. And he would never leave again. Jake was finally home. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly returned to normal. Every morning, he woke up to the sound of birds outside the window. Emily would stretch and yawn, then smile as soon as she saw him curled up beside her bed. "Good morning, buddy," she would say, scratching his head. Jake's tail wagged as he rolled onto his back, asking for belly rubs. Emily laughed and gave in. It was as if he had never been gone. One afternoon, Emily took Jake to the park. The sun was shining, and the air was crisp. Kids ran around playing. Dogs barked happily as they chased balls and wrestled in the grass. Jake felt the wind on his face as he ran. He had spent so much time lost, searching, surviving. Now he was free. Emily threw a ball, and Jake dashed after it. His paws pounded against the ground, his heart racing with joy. When he caught the ball and turned around, Emily was waiting with open arms. "You're my best boy," she said, hugging him tightly. Jake licked her cheek, his tail wagging like crazy. At home, Emily hung a new picture on the wall. It was a framed photo of Jake from before he was lost, sitting beside her with his goofy smile. Next to it, she placed another picture, one of their reunion at the airport. As she stood back to look at them, she wiped a tear from her eye. "You came back to me," she whispered. Jake sat beside her, pressing his head against her leg. "I'll never let you go again," she promised. He believed her. Years passed, but Jake and Emily's bond never changed. He grew older, his fur turning a little gray, his steps a little slower, but he was happy. Every night, he curled up at Emily's feet, listening to the soft sound of her breathing. He had been through storms, hunger, and miles of lonely roads. He had met kind people and faced fear and uncertainty. But through it all, one thing had never changed: his love for Emily and her love for him. Jake was home, forever.